Hello, welcome back to another video lesson in astrology. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about Mars in the third house. To use this information, you require two charts. The first one is, of course, the basic chart, the Rashi chart, and the next one is the Bhava chart. From the Rashi chart, you get to know whether Mars is in its own sign or exalted, deep exaltation, which is Capricorn 28 degrees, or deep debilitation, which is 28 degrees Cancer. Whether Mars is in its Mula Trikona, which is the first 12 degrees of Aries. Whether Mars occupies the sign of its friends, and the friends of Mars are the Moon, Jupiter, and the Sun. And whether Mars occupies the sign of its enemy, Mercury. There are two signs for Mercury, and that is Mars in Gemini or Mars in Virgo. Mars is not comfortable being in these two signs because Mars is the red planet and it hates to be in the green. And the green signs are Gemini and Virgo. Also, if you want to know whether Mars is with malefics like Rahu or Ketu or Saturn, all this is to be known only from the Rashi chart. Even aspects, conjunctions, everything is to be known only from the Rashi chart. Then what is the Bhava chart or the Chalit chart to be used for? The Bhava chart or the Chalit chart is just used to know which house Mars is in. That's it. Beyond that, there is no other use of the Bhava chart. I hope I have made this very clear, and so let's move on to the green board. There are 12 different ways you would have a Mars in the third house. And that's because there are 12 ascendants or 12 lagnas. So it is not just enough that you know that Mars is in the third. You need to know which type of Mars is this. So let's do the first one. Here is Mesha Lagna. Here you can see that Mars is in the sign of Mercury. It's arch rival because Mercury is green and Mars is red. If you want to remember this, you can always use this idea that Mars represents the physical energy, the physical force, and Mercury denotes the logical mind, the buddhi, and it's a war between the brawn and the brain. Whatever sage Bhrigu says in Bhrigu Sutra, he might say something good or he might say something bad about a particular combination, but there are a lot of conditions apply. If a planet is badly placed, then you should expect more of the negative side of Mars being in the third than the positive side. On the other hand, if Mars is in a friendly house or let's say exalted, for Mars in the third house, whatever positive Sage Bhrigu has said in favor of Mars in the third house, then you should apply all those to the person whose horoscope you're reading. So this is not a good situation. So let's move on. Let's select Rishabha Lagna. So let's place the ascendant so you can be more focused. So the first house is always the ascendant. Let's place Mars in the third house. Now Mars here is debilitated, and it's very important that you also check the Shadbala of this planet. If it is weak in Shadbala as well, then this Mars is really in trouble. If Mars is placed at 28 degrees, which is the deep debilitation point, then you should expect more of the negative side of Mars being in the third house. So this is a Mithuna Lagna person having Mars in the third house. This Mars is okay to some extent because Mars is happy to be here because it belongs to his friend, the Sun. So they get along well. So whatever positive has been said by Sage Bhrigu is to be applied in this case. But without conditions apply also, there are certain effects that a particular planet can do in a house. So whatever said and done, Mars in the third house is definitely a pointer to some anxiety, so to some trouble with brothers and sisters, or especially younger brothers and sisters. This is Karkadaga Lagna, Cancer ascendant, and now Mars is in Kanya or Virgo. This is the place where Mars is really upset because this house is special to Mercury, its arch rival. Here, Mercury is exalted, has its Mula Trikona, and is also has his own house. So, this is a sign that is completely dominated by the planet Mercury. And Mars hates to be here, and therefore, this is not a good combination. So, this person is likely to have lots of problems, as is stated by Sage Bhrigu in the text concerning Mars in the third house. In this situation of Simha Lagna, Leo ascendant, Mars is in the third. This Mars is somewhat better off because Mars is in the sign of Venus. Venus usually brings out the soft side of Graha to some extent, of course, so a lot better than being here. So Mars improves here a lot, a great deal. It's not as bad as it was here. So this is a situation of Mars being in its own house, and Mars here is definitely better off than being in other signs. So there are some positive points about Mars being in the third. For example, the person is expected to be very courageous, and so this Mars is good. This is a situation of ascendant in Thula Lagna, and Libra ascendant, and Mars in the sign of Jupiter. The lords of houses are always written outside, so please have a look at that. And because it is in the sign of Jupiter, the malefic nature of Mars comes down a great deal. And it also means that whenever Jupiter gets involved, whichever way you can think of, it means that there is a scope for remedies. There's a scope for alteration of the karma by knowledge, by the help of teachers, gurus, and astrologers in general, or anyone who can guide you. This is Vrishchiga Lagna, Scorpio ascendant with Mars in exaltation. Very happy to be here. And you should also look out for the Shadbala. Every time you want to know the real strength of a planet, it's always better you look at the Shadbala. And it's say in Shadbala also it's very strong, and then Mars is also here, as in this case, exalted. Then you should expect a lot of positive points to come from this combination, especially so because Mars is also the lord of the ascendant sitting in the third house, which anyway makes a person very courageous. This is Sagittarius ascendant, Dhanur Lagna, and Mars is in Kumbha. There's no special qualification like exaltation or anything else. So this is not a good Mars. So you should look further into the horoscopes of people to see if anyone else is influencing Mars. Maybe Mars is aspected by Jupiter, in which case uh, there will always be parihara, there will be remedy, there will be improvement. But if it is unaspected by benefics, then this Mars is not going to do anything good. In this horoscope, the ascendant is Capricorn, Makara Lagna, and Mars in the third. Mars is doing well here because the sign belongs to Jupiter, which you can see here. So you should expect a lot of good things to happen because Mars is in the third house. So this is Kumbha Lagna, Aquarius ascendant, and Mars is in its own sign. Could also be in Mula Trikona if it's within the first 12 degrees. You should look out for that. And this Mars is really favorable because it is the Lord of the 10th in the third, or the third Lord in the third. All of them are good. So this person is going to be really courageous. So here we have come to the last possibility. The ascendant is Pisces, Meena Lagna. And here Mars is in the house of Venus in the third, in Taurus. And therefore, you should, this kind of Mars always mellows down a little bit because it is softened up by the effect of Venus. You should expect that the bad is not going to be so much pronounced for whatever has been attributed to Mars being in the third house. So now let's find out what Sage Bhrigu has instructed us in Bhrigu Sutram. I'm referring to the translations by Dr. G S Kapoor. Mars in the third house. Swastri Vyabacharini. Shubhadrishte na doshaha Anuja Hina. Now let's see how this has been translated. If Mars is in the third house, the native will have no younger brothers or sisters, and the native's wife will be of questionable character, but this will not happen if Mars is aspected by benefic. Swastri might mean that the person might unite with his wife and also with prostitutes. Or Swastri could also be extremely beautiful women. When I looked up the website spokensanskrit.de, I found the following. For Swastri, these are the meanings. So it need not actually be that Sage Bhrigu is talking about the native's wife. So we are reading about the third house, and the third house is strongly connected to inclinations, our personal inclinations, our desires, and also our brothers and sisters, our courage, our energy levels. This is the problem with Sanskrit books that gets translated into English. It all depends on how the translation has been done. So here he says, Shubhadrishte na doshaha. So if good planets are aspecting the combination, then none of these things are going to happen. So let's introduce Jupiter, maybe here, where from he will look at this Mars by its ninth house aspect. Or maybe if Jupiter is here, he controls Mars to a great extent by directly looking at Mars. Or maybe Jupiter is here in Pisces, where from here with his fifth house aspect, he looks at Mars. In all these conditions, the bad side of Mars is less likely to manifest. Dravya Labhaha. He will also have financial gains. If Rahu Ketu Yute, Veshya Sangama. The translation goes like this: if Mars is associated with Rahu or Ketu, the native will have association with prostitutes. So, once again, here he reconfirms that this person is inclined to uniting with prostitutes. He's got high sexual drive. So, let's pull out Jupiter because the topic has changed and introduce Rahu. So, if Rahu or let's say even Ketu is with Mars, then he says this person will have association with prostitutes. This is because Rahu always denotes the unconventional or the eccentric habits or doing something forbidden. And that's the reason why in the Adam and Eve story you have the snake tempting Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. So Rahu always represents the forbidden actions, the forbidden activities. He will have inimical relationships with his brothers and will face difficulties on that account. Bratru, brother, Bratru Dveshi, Kleshayuta, Subhaga. Here Dr. G S Kapoor says his wife will have a well-shaped female organ, but when I looked up the spoken Sanskrit.de, I found out the following. Let me show that to you. Once again, I leave it to you to make your conclusions. Alpa Sahodara. Without conditions apply, this is usually, this actually means Mars in the third, usually denotes less number of brothers and sisters. So there is always some pressure on brothers and sisters because Mars is in the third. Then conditions apply starts. Papa Yute Papa Vivekshena Bratru Nashaha. If this Mars is associated with, let's say, a malefic like Saturn, or maybe another malefic like, or maybe the Sun is looking straight at Mars from here, which is a natural malefic, in that case, there will be the loss of brothers and in bracket he writes sisters. So you find that whenever malefics influence a particular planet, it always brings out the negative side of the combination. So this is a very important aspect in Bhrigu Sutra. So if you read many books and if you find that there are no conditions apply, then most probably you are not reading the right book because it's not actually going to work all the time. Unless you know the conditions apply and you know all the permutation combinations possible, you will not be able to put astrology into good use. Uccha Swakshetre Shubhayute Bratra Dirghayuha. Now he completely gives a different kind of information. So here's a situation of Mars being in the third house, and this is a situation where Mars is in exaltation. Here he says the brothers will be long lived, and the native will be patient, courageous. He will prove very valorous in the battlefield, and that's the reason why in the ancient times, the commander in chief of the armies, they were always selected based on this combination. If Mars was very strong in the chart, especially like this, Ucha Swakshetre Shubhayute Bratra Dirghayuha Dhairya Vikramavan. Dhairya is actually guts or bravery. Vikrama also almost means the same, victorious, etc. So, if Mars is in his own sign, Aries or Scorpio, or is in a sign of exaltation, Capricorn, the brothers will be long lived and the native will be patient and be brave. He will prove very valorous in the battlefield. That's why in ancient times, the commander in chief of the armies, they've always selected based on this particular combination. At least they should have a strong Mars for them to be valorous in the battlefield. If Mars occupies a friendly house, the native will be courageous. He repeats again. So you find that if Mars is well placed and then it is in the third house and strong, it brings out the positive qualities of the same Mars. And that's why you always find, in case of the police or the soldiers, you find that they have lots of guts. And even the thief, the terrorist, and the bad people also have a lot of guts. And so there is a thin line that separates these two people, and that's the reason why you will have to read astrology very carefully, because the same Mars gives inclinations and high energies, and it makes a person very courageous, which is common to both the policeman and the thief. We have come to the end of this video. In case you have any doubts, please type them out in the comment section, and whenever I find the time, I'll answer them for you. And see you soon in my next video.